My father has been wrongfully imprisoned. His name has been tarnished. You know, they try to sabotage him, and then a lot of the situation happened by the hands of some of his own children, and also members of the organization. And yeah, so what we want to do is we want to set the record straight. We want to get people to know that, one, Pops is not in jail for child molestation. He never did that. And two, the people who are behind him being in prison are hiding in plain sight. They're pretending to be family members. They're pretending to be, some of them are actually blood related, but they're pretending to be family members. They're pretending to be people who is part of the community who wants the best for Pops. But in reality, they make more money with him being locked away than they do with him being free.
Our organization existed since 1967. Got incorporated as Nubian Islamic Hebrews Ansar Allah community around 1973.
Okay.
Now from 67 to 73, we had a community set up. There was none. From 73 all the way up to 1988. From 1973 to 1988, there's never been any type of claim of anything to do with molestation or child abuse or sex scandals, nor anything dealing with bank fraud or any type of all the stuff they call RICO or money exchanges. None of these things existed from 1967 all the way up to 1988.
See, the thing is about the community is that when the community was started, Dr. York did not bar anyone from joining. He didn't, like, if you could come from any walk of life and you could be a part of this community, because it was about saving people. It was about giving people hope and giving people ground, especially black people and people of color in general, giving us a ground and an understanding of who we were, who we are, what we experienced as a people, and to give us a way to understand the traumas that we experienced as a nation. It started off with the young adults, and then the younger teenagers started doing it. So you had secular people or people who were not part of the family or the bloodline who came and joined the community. They introduced these things to the teenagers at the time who were like about 16, 17, you know what I'm saying, 11, like anywhere between this age. And then from that generation, a lot of them started doing that to the younger generation. So people like Jacob, you know, like this, like his generation of people, they started doing things like that to the next generation. But I personally believe it's because it was happening to them from the generation before them. And the thing is that Dr. York wasn't around in order to see it, and he was entrusting into the caretakers to protect his children, but in reality the caretakers were the ones that was causing the problem. Okay, the individual that molested me was also a victim of Jacob. You know, I found that out also later. So this is why I was able to forgive the person who did it to me. But the way that they would do it was it would be late at night when all of the brothers and everybody was sleeping, and because all of the boys stayed in the same room, you know, and I guess you had the small group of the older boys, and yes, Jacob was one of the spearheads of that group. You know, they would take people, or they would take a person that they've chosen for that night, and they would sodomize them in the basement. You know, and they did it in a way that just devalued the person in general. And not only that, but after they would do what they would do, they would put a bug in your ear to let you know that if you said anything to anyone, no one would believe you, and you and your family would be kicked out because you're a devil and you're a liar. So a lot of this stuff happened to people, and they were afraid to speak up about it. And then when the information came to blame Dr. York, this is when they took the opportunity, a lot of the victims took the opportunity to say, yeah, it happened to me too. You know, but the only problem is that that bug was still deep in their ear and deep rooted in them, so they're still till this day afraid to tell the truth of who exactly it was. They more or less just follow the masses, like in the social experiments. They just follow the masses and just says, yes, it was him. Even though when you ask them personally who did it and you ask them in-depth questions, they either don't have the right answers, or two, they get very standoffish. They want to resist you, they want to push you away, because they don't want to experience that trauma again, which I understand it, I truly do. At the same time, the way that I feel is like, my father sits in prison today, and yes, I keep saying that he's not in prison because of child molestation, but that's what's in the minds of most people. You know what I'm saying? This is why people won't actually look into his situation and try to defend his case, because that's what they think. They think that he's in jail for molesting kids, when it's not what he was in jail for. It did happen to the kids, but not by him. Well, Jacob is my biological brother. Jacob York is my father's son. Zubaydah is his mother. When it comes to Jacob, everybody knows that Jacob has a history of hating his father. And Jacob has a tendency to fabricating stories to try to make his dad look much worse than what he is. And I know this firsthand because I didn't stay around Jacob for a long time, because after my father found out the stuff that was happening, he started systematically moving certain children out. You know what I'm saying? And I was one of the kids that got moved out in order to keep safe. As a matter of fact, there's stories that went around that Jacob got thrown off of Kadesh because he was molesting children, and he got caught. And the word went back to our father. So he got thrown off the land. This was heavy on his mother. Not too long after that, she lost her life. Not accepting the fact that there's a possibility that the shame that he brought upon his own mother is what could have killed him. But he blames her father. He blames Dr. York.
Jacob York, his name is Yaqub Abdullah Muhammad. Right? His mother's name is Zubaydah Abdullah Muhammad. And he has, siblings, brothers and sisters. Right? It's a very touchy situation because his mother died of an aneurysm attack. Right? Me and her have been separated for many, many, many years. You follow? And she died of an aneurysm attack, which her father also died from, and one of her brothers, Maddie, all died from Maddie Johnson. Alright? He went off and told people that I was responsible for the death of his mother. This really affected the kid. It destroyed his mind. He came to me at one point and asked me for some money. Right? He wanted me to help back him to back Little Kim. I told him I cannot back a person like Little Kim with my reputation. I'm not going to put my reputation on the line. And what she knew and stuff like that, I got nothing against her and her career. That's her life. But it doesn't fit into our lifestyle. And I didn't want that to reflect on our community. He got very mad. He started cursing, stomping around. And, he left and went off.
Jacob, he basically gathered a group of young girls and he took them to Florida, and he exposed them to this secular lifestyle. He let them see what it's like to stay in a 5-star hotel. He let them see what it was like to be able to buy fancy dresses where people look at them and says, "Oh wow, you look gorgeous." He introduced them to smoking weed. He introduced them to getting drunk, and he took them to the clubs where they partied. Habiba was part of this group.
Everybody started venting in the car about different things that we didn't like. It had nothing to do with child molestation, had nothing to do with any criminal acts. It was just different things that, normal things that you don't like about growing up, or, we might have had an argument with Malachi here and there, and we brought up the situation. Jacob kind of fed off of that anger, and he convinced all of us that we should take that anger and we should go to the government with a story about his father.
It went off. Him and Sakina Parham at the time was kind of close because they used to be boyfriend and girlfriends when they were upstate. See, Jake York, Yaqub, was Ada's boyfriend. He was also Sakina Parham's boyfriend, and they had gotten caught several times upstate having sex. Right? And they got in trouble for that. He became an avid hater of me, and he became one of the
they went to Florida to conspire against Pops. When they came back, they had their organization and their plan to do that. Jacob went to Sheriff Seals to try to get get Sheriff Seals to understand that he's got witnesses that are willing to speak against his father, against Pops, against Dr. York.
Jacob York wanted to meet with me to tell me what was really going on. So I said, fine, I'll meet you at the FBI office in Atlanta in the morning at 9 o'clock.
They're still around today. I mean, like these people, they're still here. They haven't died. Well, maybe some of them has died already, but majority of them are still around today. They're still alive. You know, the victims and the aggressors. You know, living their life. You know, away from the community, doing their own thing. Because of fear and trauma, yes. Which is understandable. It is. Because trauma can cause a person to do some of the most stupidest things. And in their minds, they're doing it because they feel safe in doing it. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I can understand why they're doing that. Because, I mean, I went through my own trauma. But my thing was like this. I can't sit back and have my father sitting in prison for something that happened to me, knowing that it wasn't him that did it. Knowing that I'm part of the collective of people who people are accusing he did that too. Because I was in that group. And I can tell you, as a person that was in that group, that wasn't Dr. York. You know what I'm saying? It was them teenagers. It was them brothers. And it was the sisters.
And then have no complaints of any type of child molestation through the man's whole youthful part of my life, the whole time, from the time I'm like 20-something all the way up to 50-something, there's nothing. And then I wait till I'm 50-something years old, I'm going into old age, and then I start playing games and pretending, and they're keeping records of me having sex up to something like 5 and 6 times per day at my age. Impossible.
Because I'm not afraid anymore. I acknowledge that there's nothing that they can do to hurt me anymore, and I think it's not right that my father still sits in prison, and people like Jacob York gets to be free, gets to experience pleasures of life, riding in yachts and all of this stuff, right? You know, and yet Dr. York has to be in prison. They did those crimes. He didn't. Jacob York stole money from people in the community. Doc didn't. Jacob York molested people. Doc didn't. Jacob York imported illegal minors over state line to introduce them to clubs, alcohol, sex, drugs, fancy life living styles of being a rap star's girlfriend. He introduced that to them. Why? He introduced it so that he can have power and clout over them, so that he can convince them to betray his father, so he can convince them that that Pops is lying to them about what this world has to offer. Why am I coming out now? Because I'm not afraid of them, and I would like to see them attempt to do something to me. Not to mention it's right. And I'm ashamed that it took me this long to come this far out. But at the same time, trauma has an ugly way to mess with people's heads. So you want to know why I'm doing it now? Because it's time. And I dare someone to try to stop me from telling the truth about my father and what happened to him.